Welcome to the Epic Score podcast. I'm Gabe Shadid. I'm your host, and my guest today is Tom Dunlap. Currently, he is an owner at SuperBloom, which is his ad agency.
Yep.
And Tom has had an incredible career of just straight upward trajectory for years and years and years, 2 decades. We've known each other over 20 years.
Absolutely.
Families, business. It's been a wild road. You've been to other countries. You've done everything that was needed to be done.
Lots of iterations in the Gabe Shadid and Tom Dunlap world.
Exactly. Right. You knew me before Epic Score was a thing.
I knew you when you had hair.
And I had some hair. That's right. I miss my hair, actually.
You look good without it.
That's all right. My wife likes it like this, so I suffer.
Fair enough.
Of anybody I've known, that singular focus that you've had for marketing, advertising, doing anything, everything to keep that trajectory going. Where did it come from? Well, what was the pull into advertising? How did it start for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have always been someone who has made things and very curious about how things are made. In high school, I was one of the founders of our school's first news channel. I was involved in theater and in producing, both as an actor and, as a producer, the plays that we put on. And I just really have always been drawn to the creative world and curious about it. And living at the forefront of technology, especially in the 80s with computers and digital video cameras, and I just started to see the tools and I was curious about the tools, but had no idea I could make a career out of it. I just didn't know. I thought I had to be a doctor. Thought I had to be a lawyer.
I think your dad was a doctor.
My dad is a doctor.
Is a doctor.
I actually started college as a pre-med person. I won't really say major because I never really made it. Got a wife out of it, which was good. But no, I started out in pre-med because I thought I needed to, I wanted to go down the traditional track. I saw doctors did this, they made money. Okay, I can't get through chemistry. I guess I got to do law. So I went into pre-law. And then pre-law was a lot of reading. But all the while I was sort of drawn to still creativity and music and in art. And then I sort of just landed in, if I wasn't going to do, pre-med and I wasn't going to do pre-law, what else was there? What can I actually do to get through college? And marketing seemed interesting. There seemed like there's some creativity there. There was international business. And that's where I was introduced to what the world of advertising is. And there was one particular professor, and she ran an ad agency in Denver. And I was taking my first advertising class, just like core curriculum. And she made us write an ad. And I wrote an ad. And, as we were turned the papers in, as we got filing out of class that day, she goes, "Hey, come here, Tom." She's like, "Have you ever thought about a career in advertising?" I was like, "Well, no. What's that?
What's that?"
And, she's like, "Well, this ad you wrote was really smart. And you wrote copy that was really quick and concise, and you had a call to action. And you were kind of the only person in the class that really did that, and you have no formal training. So maybe you should consider advertising." And so that was sort of my first cue, was this one professor from the ad agency in Denver called Carson Hagen, still around. And from there, I was just like, okay, that sounds cool. And started taking more of those classes. And then I started to combine creativity into that curriculum. I had a guy in my fraternity who, we're talking like 1996, but he had a computer. And he had art tools. He was an artist, and so he could do graphic design. So I started to bring my ideas to life for those classes. And my friends that were with me at that stage still reference some of the work that I was doing because it was really good. I made this Guinness black and tan ad that was still to this day would be a great campaign. I've somehow we should bring it back.
Note to Guinness.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I, graduated college and my dad's asking me, "What are you going to do? How are you going to make money? You're graduating in a few months."
You're not a doctor.
You're not a doctor, which he didn't want me to do. And he was smart about that because he knew me. And I said, well, advertising, why not? And he introduced me to somebody who at the time was a friend of his. And he was working, his name was Richard O'Neill. And he was working at an ad agency in Los Angeles called Chiat. No idea.
Huge agency.
Huge agency. But I had no idea at the time even what that meant. I was like, Chiat, I remember just thinking about this company. And there was no internet at the time, so I couldn't research it. So I had to go to the library and read Ad Age, to do my research. And I called up Richard, and he told me what he did. He's like, well, I am a producer. And I go, okay, that's interesting. I have no idea what that means. I think I want to be a creative, or maybe I want to be an account guy, because that's the only jobs I knew were in advertising. So I knew I could be a good client person because I could play the part. And I thought I was creative, but I know that if I did that, I had to continue to go to more school to build a portfolio. So I flew myself to Los Angeles and walked into Chiat, and it absolutely blew my mind. I had no idea a company like this existed. They had no offices. They had, there was open seating. You had a laptop and a portable phone. And when you arrived at this office, it's in downtown Venice, and it's a Frank Gehry designed building. No idea who Frank Gehry was.
Who was that?
But you enter into this gigantic 50-foot set of binoculars into this creative mecca. I mean, it blew my 19-year-old mind or 20-year-old mind.
I've ridden my bicycle past that binocular building 8 million times. I never knew it was Chiat. I always wondered what
it was designed and built for Chiat, and it's pretty spectacular. It's got 3 parts to it. There's the big white part, which is a ship's bow. Then there's the
binoculars are black.
Binoculars are black, and it's the entrance to the parking garage. They're stacked. You drive through it. And then on the right-hand side is this copper structure, which is meant to be a modern forest. It was very 90s architectural design, but it was epic. I mean, it was young, vibrant people. People were leaving at lunch to go surfing. And
didn't these places have like pool tables and basketball hoops?
Oh,
and they built it so that they sort of sucked you in, and you were actually okay.
You didn't want to leave.
You were okay with spending 18 hours.
Oh God, yeah. Bagels and cream cheese every day.
There you go.
They had this coffee machine that made like 10 different types of coffee. Then twice a week they'd cater lunch, and there was parties and cool people walking around, and it was really spectacular. And so here I am.
So Chiat is the beginning.
Chiat was the beginning.
And so you walked in there, you had an appointment.
I had an appointment. This was like kind of an informational interview, And what was interesting about it is I got there that day, and Richard, who is the head of production there. I mean, Richard, just to give you some context, he's the godfather of modern advertising. He made the first epic Super Bowl commercial. He made 1984 for Apple with Ridley Scott. So this is a legendary guy. And at the time, he was working on Nissan Toys, which was that animated commercial. It was like Barbie dolls with the Nissan Z. I don't know if you remember that. It's
the only Nissan Z, and I don't know, did Chiat do this ad? I remember that I'm having this dream. And they're chasing me, but they can't catch me.
They can't get me, and it's flying.
Yes, it's flying. So that was
I just got shivers. Because
I love that ad. It stuck with me for years.
Oh my God!
Well, I still remember.
Well, when you look at the work that this company had made in the 80s and the early 90s, it was groundbreaking. It invented the idea of. It took what the men and women who built the advertising industry in the 70s and early 80s, and just blew it up.
Yeah.
Took Hollywood, put it with marketing, and blew it up. I mean, it went from working with these old school directors to like the Ridley Scotts of the world, making epic advertising that was more interesting to watch than the Super Bowl. And this guy, Richard, was the reason why that happened.
He was at the forefront.
He was at the forefront of it. So what turned out actually is that day I showed up.
You met him and you were
Okay. So I I hadn't graduated yet. I flew myself out in like early May, before I graduated in June, whatever, April maybe. And he lived in Malibu. And I get this call from his assistant, or I show up, and because we didn't have cell phones, at the front desk, I'm here to see Richard. And they go, okay, Richard couldn't come in today. His house is burning down.
Oh my gosh.
There was a fire in Malibu. So he was up there, making, it hadn't burned down, but he was up making sure it didn't. So he couldn't come in the office that day. But the secretary said, he's asked to have you sit in with Lee Clow, our chief creative officer and chairman. You're going to sit with Lee all day. Do you know who Lee is? And I go, I have no idea who Lee Clow is. And so context, Lee Clow as a creative, well, he looks like Gandalf. He's famous, tall, skinny, beard, surfer, creative director who is like one of Steve Jobs' best friends, and he helped Steve Jobs become Steve Jobs. And he's again, one of the creative luminaries of the advertising industry. You've got like Dan Wieden, you've got Lee Clow and a few others. And Lee was it. I had no idea who this dude was. He's like, I'm coming to advertising. Here's this guy in a t-shirt and shorts and flip-flops. And I get sat in a room with these other two creatives who ended up becoming really good friends of mine, Chuck and Clay. And I introduced myself, and I'm there as a preppy, fraternity guy from the University of Denver. And I'm sitting with these surfers, in this room. And, and they're putting together a pitch. They have a meeting later in the afternoon. The client was Taco Bell.
So you're literally just like sort of fly on the wall for this day.
Fly on the wall for the day. They just set me in the creative department because they heard that maybe I want to be a creative. So I got sat with the leader, the most, one of the most luminary people on the face of the earth who I had no idea who it was.
Crazy.
So I'm walking in this no context and we're getting ready. I show up 10, and we're getting ready for a meeting, I think around 1 p.m. And it was to Taco Bell. And so Chuck and Clay and Lee were finalizing the presentation to sell in the Taco Bell Chihuahua. This was my first day. And so I'm in this room and they're pitching these concepts about this talking Chihuahua. And there was a bunch of other ideas too. But that was the thing. And of course they're looking at me. They're like, "Oh, what do you think?" And I go, "Oh, it sounds cool. Cool. I don't know what the hell I'm doing here.
This is neat."
So come 1 o'clock. Well, firstly at noon, instead of eating lunch, Lee goes and surfs in Venice for an hour. Comes back, walks in just as the meeting started, wet hair, and they pitch the Taco Bell Chihuahua. Yo quiero Taco Bell to Taco Bell. So that was my first meeting in advertising.
Wow.
And the meeting didn't go that well. It was not a great meeting. It wasn't an aggressive meeting, but it was, the client had feedback and, I had no idea what was going on, who was on the other side of the conference call line, on the phone. It wasn't even video because we didn't have, video conferencing. And so the day went well. And then I met some other people and learned a little bit more about, the different roles in advertising, but that was my first experience. And then, I told Richard, I said, I would love to have an internship here, and so he brought me in. So I graduated, he brought me in and I started as an intern in the broadcast department of Chiat. Again, someone asked me the week before I went there, they knew about the agency. They asked me this very specific question, which I still resonates in my mind every day. It's a weird question. They said, "You're starting at Chiat. That's great. It's a great agency. What capacity will you be working in?" And I said, "I don't know. I think the broadcast department." They go, "Oh, interesting. So in production," I go, "What's production?"
Maybe.
I want to be a creative or I want to be an account guy. I didn't know what production was. So,
and you ultimately became a production guy,
well,
ironically.
I did. So I landed in that department. And again, the first day I show up, I'm driving from my apartment in Playa del Rey, into the office in Venice. And I drive past a film shoot that's on Abbot Kinney, which was about 3 blocks from the office, thinking, oh, that's a film shoot. They're shooting a movie. It's Los Angeles. I've been here 3 days. Show up to work, go into the broadcast department. The first thing they said is, "Hey, we need you to go and take this package down to the set." And guess what they were shooting?
Taco Bell.
Taco Bell, Yo Quiero Taco Bell, the first commercial.
So
it all came full circle. So that was my first introduction to advertising. And I saw that And I was hooked. I was like, wait a minute. It harkened back to my experience in theater and in video production in high school. It harkened back to, there was business involved in it, dollars, budgets, client management. It harkened to creativity. It hit all the touch points that I was interested in without having to go to a creative portfolio school or go into some other business school. I could jump right in and work with these incredibly cool people making stuff.
This is classic learning by doing.
Absolutely.
Right? In life, sometimes we're learning in school, we're learning by reading, and then there's the learning by doing. And it seems that a lot of entertainment jobs seem to be learning by doing, and just getting in somewhere so that you're in that thriving environment is such a key, right?
Well, it comes down to a couple things, Gabe, and I think you could even attest to this. It's all learning by doing. Entertainment has so many facets to it. You've got business aspects and money and investment. You've got the art of creativity, the world of art and commerce coming together. You've got, all these different tangential points. But the thing that unites all of those points is passion and curiosity, right? No one's in the entertainment industry because it's a good business to be in, because it's not. It's a terrible business. But they're in it because they love the art of film or music or fashion or costuming or makeup. They love the art form and they're curious about it, and they've absorbed and been influenced by whatever is in the ether that has made them want to do that. But you come here to do that, and you have to be a self-entrepreneur to make it work. And you have to be curious, and you have to keep trying and chasing that next thing. Otherwise, you become irrelevant immediately. But it starts with curiosity.
Yeah, you're talking about pushing and driving and being curious or becoming irrelevant. And that's one of the themes, again, from knowing you all these years. You have just always pushed towards the next thing. And I sat there not quite understand. You were all in on that alternate media marketing. A product will pay you to make a video that you don't even know was paid for by them, but it's all very smoothly and subtly showing the positive sides of whatever that product may be, and they pay big bucks for that. And it's never gonna air on a television screen. It's only gonna show up in streaming, or it only might be in a theater, and it's never gonna air on, the traditional, NBC and primetime or whatever. And I feel like you really were at a forefront. You believed in that. Tell me about that. I mean, you believed in that lock, stock, and barrel. Well, and you were right.
Well, again, so another key moment in my career, you have mentors that say things to you, and you probably remember one out of every 10 things or piece of advice they give you. But again, somebody who, myself, very motivated to have a career quickly. That's why I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer. I knew a career path, so I don't like ambiguity. I want to know what the thing is. But again, as I was growing in this industry, Richard O'Neill said to me, you need to make digital your thing. Digital, my thing. The internet was coming. We had no idea what was going to happen there. We knew there was interactivity and storytelling happening. We knew there was banners. We knew that there was this whole world around interactivity in what was digital at the time. We were working at Apple, and we saw the innovations of what Steve Jobs was doing with, the iPhone and all these things. And so Richard said, I made my way. My career was defined by merging Hollywood and commercials into an art form, specifically around visual effects. That was like what he was known for. The advice I was given to focus, if I was going to focus on one thing, focus on the rise of the internet and digital, whatever that meant. And so that led my entire journey from there. So if Richard made he made all of his world, he became the boss of this agency by merging Hollywood and visual effects into commercial filmmaking. I was there my thing was going to be to harness the power of innovation of what the internet was going to become and what it was going to do for the industry, the production industry that I was working in.
Now, you moved to Amsterdam. How long were you in Amsterdam for?
3 years.
What was the opportunity that was in front of you that was only in Amsterdam that you couldn't get in the United States because you moved the family, you uprooted your life? And was that an adventure? Was it a sacrifice? Was it just what had to be done?
Yeah.
Explain to me, because there's a risk in that, right?
Yeah. So the move to Amsterdam was very strategic for a number of reasons. All of my career decisions have been made because I want to move to the next level. I have something I want to learn, or even more specifically, something I want to make. And the move to Amsterdam was a gift. Again, I had worked at Chiat and a couple other companies before that time, and had learned, the creative industry, or how production supports the creative industry. And I've made a bit of a name for myself, and so I had a little bit of credibility out there. I got a call from an incredible advertising agency. So in the world of creative advertising, you can go into big agencies like Ogilvy, Leo, and Publicis and work on, more corporate accounts, still have great creative experience, go work in these big companies. Or there's this subset of smaller, more independent creative companies that are just known for just creativity. That was Chiat. And the other one was Wieden+Kennedy. And Wieden+Kennedy is like the Mecca. That is like, if you look at the landscape of creative advertising, 9 times out of 10, the work that is shaped, that you reference in your life is probably come out of Wieden+Kennedy. Nike, Just Do It, Old Spice. I mean,
wow.
Incredible. This was the top of the top. They called and said,
so out of the blue.
Out of the blue. Well, there was,
I
again,
love that. That's my favorite.
Well, I mean, there was people that helped me get there. Again, I had a little credibility in the industry, and I was known as an up and coming, rising person.
And what were you're saying you're making a name for yourself. What were you known for in that time?
I was known for making incredible commercials. And I had an ability to find incredible talent, directors and music companies, working with the commercial production industry, convincing them to work with us, figuring out how to do it, and taking on really complicated, large-scale projects, but finding innovative ways to bring those to life. That was just at an early stage.
So you had a strength, is it fair to say, in team building?
Well, operations, organization, and what I like to call packaging. I could go into places and talk with big established directors and find ways to collaborate with them, and then bring that into my creative team. And I became a creative producer at the time. So I built a little bit of a name for myself. And so there were some people that represented these commercial companies. When Wieden says, tell me who the best producers are, they found me. I talked with the head of production, the guy that was running Wieden+Kennedy at the time. And I told him it was very clear. My ambitions are to, I was like a senior producer. I want to run a department. That's my goal. I'd like in the next few years, I'd like to be a head of production in an agency. So they actually hired me to go to Wieden+Kennedy Portland. There was a guy there who was leaving. It was actually a friend of mine. He was leaving to go to another agency in the Midwest. And there was an executive producer job open at Wieden+Kennedy Portland. I went up, I interviewed, I met all the crazy Wieden people, Dan Wieden, everybody. And I got the job. I got the job to move to Portland. Julia, my wife, was into it. We had a 2-year-old or 1.5-year-old daughter at the time. We were interested in, life outside of Los Angeles. Again, we wanted to just kind of spread our wings, and took the job. About a week after I took the job, and I had resigned, and we were starting to put together the pieces to move to Portland, I got a call going, would you like to be the head of production at Wieden+Kennedy Amsterdam?
Did they know that you had committed to Portland?
Yeah, so the same guy that hired me in Portland was also overseeing, they were helping to recruit this new role in Amsterdam, and they were rebuilding that company. And he said, I know you got this executive producer job. How would you like an even bigger promotion to the head of production of Wieden+Kennedy, Amsterdam? Now, I'm 29 years old.
Wow.
That's not a job you give a 29-year-old person. But somehow I presented myself. I had a little bit of gray hair, so I looked a little
You always
older.
you had some gray in that beard.
I had a beard, I had a kid, so I was just a little bit more mature, I guess, than
your outward image appeared.
I just sort of, I presented beyond my years, and so I was able to, convince them, or they were convinced that I could be that guy. So
they bought your personal marketing package.
They bought the Tom Dunlap brand. They obviously didn't do their research. But I said, yeah. This meeting was at the Hotel Oceana in Santa Monica.
How long do you think about that before you say yes?
I didn't even think. I said absolutely.
Honey, we're moving to Europe.
And the guy at the time, Ben Gorillowitz is his name. Ben says, well, don't you want to talk to your wife? And I go, no, she'll be fine. I knew my wife. Yeah, of course. She's lived all over the world.
She's awesome.
I called her from the car. I go, well, it looks like I'm moving to Amsterdam. She's like, when do we go?
Well, let's pack the bags.
Let's go. And she was in school at the time. She was getting her master's at USC. But it worked out perfectly. And we were able to move to Amsterdam.
Your second child was born there.
My second child was born there, which was an amazing experience in itself. But that became a platform for me as a department head to, again, push my agenda. I had a very specific reason why I wanted to go to Amsterdam, why I wanted to work at Wieden+Kennedy. I wanted to work on Nike. I wanted to make Nike spots. Best work ever made in the world.
Who doesn't want to make a Nike spot?
Yeah, and I had this fascination with animation. Animation was a growing art form, from a technology standpoint. It hadn't been widely used to the extent that Pixar was doing things in feature films. No one had really taken that into the commercial world. And I wanted to do that. I wanted that animation to be my calling card. And the only way I was going to be able to push that agenda was to be the leader of the department and part of the leadership team at an agency to help define what brands can we bring into animation and do something really spectacular. And so that was really, besides, wanting to work on Nike, wanting to push a new agenda on, how we make through animation, that was really the goal with moving to Holland to do this job. It ended up being so much more than that. But that was the impetus to saying yes to that position.
I remember there was a lot of bike riding with kids on the...
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was like a family bicycle.
Amsterdam was incredible. And it was a time too there where Amsterdam was kind of the global creative hub for the world. It's a place that is really easy to live. The government at the time was really supportive of creative knowledge immigration. They saw Nike's headquarters are there, Adidas's headquarters are there, Philips headquarters are there. All the big agencies had big agencies there for a reason why you could move there and pretty inexpensively. English was a language that could be spoken there, and so you could have creatives from Asia, Africa, South America, all these, Europe, and they could all kind of converge on this community and have an experience together. And so it was really a really exciting time there. It's also at the time was at the one of the countries that was investing heavily in interactive, digital and interactive storytelling. And there was a lot of investment from the government going into companies that were, expanding. And so that being there gave me the ability to not only make the work I was looking to make, but it also it opened my eyes to a whole other trajectory of the industry that I didn't even know existed. Interactive storytelling, the way you create advertising campaigns for multiple languages and multiple audiences and cultures, how you do that with technology, how you do that with creative, and then gave me access to some of the most amazing creative technologists that were coming up in Europe to build websites and create interactive experiences. And it was there that I learned. I took my career from being a head of broadcast production, just making TV commercials, to a true director of integrated production. I built one of the first departments that was capable of taking on any form of media we could possibly make for. TV commercials, interactive, experiential, print, photography, and events. And I built a philosophy for a department that was based on my curiosity. I built the team, structured the roles, defined the mission and the ambition, and built a prototype for a very forward, future-facing production department inside of an agency.
I remember many years ago, there were people who resisted what you were trying to build.
Yeah.
And you were just like, this is the future, jump on, or, you're going to be the word you said earlier, irrelevant. And, and you just kept pushing. It didn't matter the criticism and Amsterdam ends, you come back to the United States. What brought you back? What stopped that and started in the United States again?
So irrelevancy is like is
this keeping you up at night?
It's the thing that chases you, and I think in an industry that is so defined by how you impact culture, irrelevancy, becoming irrelevant, sitting on your haunches and not embracing innovation is the death of a creative individual in a commerce setting, right?
Wow. That is quite the sentence.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear you, and
we're faced with it too with AI today, but we'll talk about that later.
Absolutely, yeah.
But so I came back, and the reason I came back to Los Angeles, again, I had accomplished all the things that I needed to do in Amsterdam in a very short period of time. I made an incredible animated campaign for Coca-Cola that ended up winning all the awards, put me on the face of a magazine. So now my status in industry was even more elevated as somebody that was shaping the modern view of production.
Wasn't there some epic score little thing?
Absolutely.
That was in that one of those animated.
Yeah, we put epic score into one of the Coke things we did. Yeah, I can't remember what, but there was.
I can't remember what.
Yeah, because I was again.
I remember something was rolling down a thing, and it was like.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That was.
I always tapped you.
Oh,
and that's always.
I always appreciated that.
And I do that. I mean, I work with the people I like, right? So, people I like. I like them because they're doing things that are innovating or can help me out creatively. I will absolutely support that. And that's been a big part of my career.
Right. That other one was that military gaming.
The Call of Duty reality show.
The reality show. And you came in and used Epic Score on that, and that was really cool.
Yeah.
There was some big Call of Duty launch thing. I had never seen it. You invited me to... What was that event? I mean, it was incredible.
Call of Duty. It was the Call of Duty launch event. For that season. That fall season. They launch the game every year in October, November, and they do a big old party.
There were celebrities all over the place.
That's Call of Duty.
Oh my gosh, it was quite the event.
Yeah, it was.
So you come back to the United States.
So I came back and I went to an ad agency called Deutsch. For a very specific reason. They were a challenger brand, especially here in Los Angeles. They were doing really incredible creative work, but they were also running a really great business. And there was two guys there, Mike Sheldon and Eric Hirschberg. Mike was the CEO, Eric was the chief creative officer. And they were just being really, really smart. and they were investing in interactive. And at the time, they were really, my next thing that I wanted to get involved with was branded entertainment. I wanted to make TV shows for brands. I'd made a ton of commercials. I'd done websites, print ads, I'd done a lot of stuff, but I wanted to take brands into entertainment. So I knew I had to come back to LA, and I knew I needed a company that supported that mission as a way in.
And this is, again, an alternate kind of marketing that's subtle. You may not even understand that the brand funded it or was behind it. They just have some kind of subtle...
Some tie into it, an integration. I at the time, I'd sort of, coined this idea of, weaving brands into the fabric of the storytelling. So I didn't want branded entertainment to be just ads, the giant, 3-hour ad. I wanted the brand to create a moment, a cultural moment that the brand could brand around. So they own the cultural moment. It has some insight into something they're selling or their service or business that sits in the middle of it, but it's true storytelling, the kind of storytelling that we look at every day on television or in feature films, but it creates a moment that a brand can leverage. And I saw a lot of power in that. And there was a few things happened at the time that were kind of interesting, but getting back to Los Angeles, the center of the universe for television and feature film development and production, was the right move. And Deutsch was interested in what I wanted to do. I still wanted to make ads. I love making ads. And I needed to get back to LA, and the whole thing kind of worked out, and they believed in what I was bringing to the table and empowered me to do it.
And after Deutsch, is that RSA?
So then that same thing, the next step was RSA Films. I only stayed at Deutsch for about 1.5 years.
So RSA Films is?
Ridley Scott Associates. It was, at that time, it was the commercial production and music video arm of the Ridley Scott universe.
That sounds terribly boring.
It was incredible. But what's interesting was, again, in the time I was at Deutsch, I had forged myself within the Hollywood industry, and like William Morris Endeavor and CAA. I was just ripping down walls inside of these talent agencies, trying to figure out how to get Hollywood talent and packaging and make these TV shows. And that's how I ended up meeting the team at RSA, because I then all of a sudden was in this really interesting place as an ad agency person that understood how to make ads, but also had a little bit of knowledge into how to make TV shows and commercials, and understood how to navigate the worlds of the talent agencies and the networks. And so RSA at the time was a massive company. They were doing, I think when I went there in 2009, probably over $2 billion worth of content production. Movies, TV shows, documentaries, commercials, music videos, offices in Asia, Europe, US.
This is what they were spending, or
this was the money that was coming through.
Money
that would like Fox was spending with them, and global television. It was incredible, right?
Unbelievable.
And I'm a kind of a film guy. Like, to be honest with you, like I had to watch the Ridley Scott films because before my interview with them and Tony, because I'd seen a few. Like everyone's seen Gladiator and everyone's seen Top Gun, True Romance, but I didn't truly know who these people were, which I think is what they liked. I wasn't this like starstruck, like film nerd coming in there. Oh my God, Ridley Scott. And I was like, yeah, what are you guys doing here? But what was cool about it was they had all these people in all these departments. And so I was like a kid in the candy stores. So I can go to brands and sell a reality series and develop a reality series. I can go to Pharrell and sell this like music content thing. I was like, this is incredible. And with the name of Ridley and Tony Scott behind me, it was like, holy cow, that's a powerful, powerful tool. And at this time, the world, the entertainment world was changing. YouTube was bubbling up. Brands were spending more money in other formats of media. And this place was perfectly suited to jump on that. And so that's why I went to RSA. I wanted to learn the business of entertainment. Again, part of my theme is like curiosity and wanting to understand the business of production and entertainment through the lens of advertising so that I could take that model upstream beyond ad agencies directly to brands. And that's why we were shooting, we were working directly with Activision to build esports reality shows before esports was even a thing. We were doing these digital series. I did, with Budweiser, I spent 3 months in South Africa during the 2010 World Cup producing a global reality show for Budweiser on the ground in Cape Town, which I have a Big Brother meets Amazing Race. I was doing documentaries. I made a movie for the Fuji TV network, all done with YouTube footage to commemorate the big tsunami in Fukushima and the earthquake in Japan. We were just doing things that nobody else was doing.
Right.
And I was trying to integrate all the parts of what RSA and Scott Free were doing. So I had done all this incredible work for Coca-Cola. So they knew me as this guy. And when CAA, who represented Coke, was like, hey, the guys at Coke know who you are. You're working with Ridley. We'd like to develop the Coke Polar Bear franchise into a feature film franchise, and we'd love to do with Ridley. We want the polar bears to talk. We need to figure that out. We need to figure out what they look like, how that works. And I had just come from the Coca-Cola system because that was our big client at Wieden+Kennedy. So I knew what they needed, and I could bring Ridley into this deal and help shepherd it through, using the power of what they've built from a film and storytelling standpoint, the knowledge of how to support a brand through the process. And thus, we made the pilot for what never ended up happening, but the pilot for the Polar Bears film.
So you do a bunch of crazy stuff at Ridley Scott, RSA, and then it's off to a really cool boutique after that, right? Yeah. 72 and Sunny.
Yeah. 72 and Sunny was, at the time that they reached out to me, a very small but very fast growing independent creative company. The guys that founded it came out of Wieden+Kennedy and Wieden+Kennedy Amsterdam specifically. I had missed them there, so I didn't know them, but knew of them because they built that shop that they had left, and I was brought in under a new regime that was there to replace them. So I knew about them, and they had another guy that was one of the guys that hired me at Deutsch that had just come on, or had been at their team and knew of me, and they were at an inflection point. So they were, at the time that I went there, probably like 100 people. And they were just starting to grow and get bigger and bigger clients. And we're doing incredible work. And they had all these disparate production entities. They had a broadcast department. They had an interactive department. They had a print production and art production department. And they had like a little editorial unit. And so they needed somebody that knew how to operationalize all of that into one single offering. And they wanted to do it with somebody that had a vision for where the future of content and advertising was going. And I just so happened to be coming from RSA, where I was doing brand entertainment, doing documentaries. I'd come out of Wieden+Kennedy, so they knew I had the creative chops, and they knew I had the business chops coming out of Deutsch. So as they were looking to expand their footprint, I was a very logical choice. And RSA was running into some issues at the time. Tony had just recently passed away, and that company was going into a holding pattern. So the timing matched up really, really perfectly. And they brought me in as their first global chief production officer.
And even after you were there for some time, didn't they build a whole internal separate business that they tasked you with?
Well, so
running?
Again, I always, every opportunity that I take, there's a reason, right? And I had just come out of, all the steps led to things I wanted to make, things I wanted to try, or something I wanted to learn. So one of the ambitions I had with coming to 72 and Sunny that I learned while I was at RSA was that there was an aspect of what I was doing at RSA that was missing. There was the role of strategic thinking, the things that ad agencies do so well. I can make anything. I can bring a showrunner, director, producer, animator into anything. But to make it make sense for a brand, to give it the ROI that a brand needs, like just by making a TV show for a brand doesn't mean it's going to sell more things, right? There has to be something else. And so I knew that RSA wasn't going to be able to invest in that. But I knew 72 could. So they wanted my thinking around branded entertainment, my access to Hollywood, the talent that I had amassed, the relationships, and my understanding of the business of production to help grow their company. And at the time, we were being challenged at 72 by brands like Samsung and Google. These were companies, especially Google, who were moving at the speed of culture. So typically, advertising takes a long time to make. TV shows take a long time to make, right? It takes a long time to produce things. But Google said, we need to be able to essentially make ads in a week. Concept them, produce them, execute them, get them out the door, in a week. We need to harness what's going on the internet, on culture, and get that out. Otherwise, we become irrelevant. We are the internet, so we need to be in front of the internet and showing people that. So that was the first foray into, the idea of building in-house production at an ad agency is an old idea, but doing it in a modern way, using what I'd learned over the years from working in post-production, working in film production, I could bring that knowledge to the table and help them create a studio that could execute content at the speed of culture. And that was the impetus for building what ended up becoming Hecho Studios.
Hecho was the internal.
Hecho became the internal production company there. And as somebody that was leading their production department, and we were getting all these brands that were like, hey, we need to move at the speed of culture. That combined with the rise of digital television, the Vices of the world, the BuzzFeeds, all these editorial platforms that brands were like, well, agencies can't harness culture and move fast. We're going to go to the Vices of the world. And so they were starting to eat our lunch, right? Because they had these incredible active users on their websites, and they were creating really provocative content that was getting millions and millions of views. But our agency creatives didn't know how to do that. We didn't have the pipes to distribute that work beyond media channels. And so we were losing market share to these publishers.
And it seems like originally the focus was always on the highest quality content, highest quality production.
Oh yeah.
But stuff started going viral, and there was
quality didn't matter.
The quality didn't matter. Thank you. And
content
that just did not compute in I think the traditional advertising world, right?
The theme there was content and context, right? So yes, if you're going to make an ad that's going to run on the NFL, you need it to be badass, right? If you're going to make content that runs on Vice's platforms, it needs to look like the Vice content, which had an edge to it, had a look. It wasn't as polished. You had these filmmakers and these journalists out in the world, getting chased by mercenaries, and that was what we were competing with. And so, one, I had to learn how to harness those partners. So I had to learn how to work like a publisher, and I'd had some experience because that was what I was trying to do at RSA, was make RSA into a publisher. So I had a little bit of knowledge into how that was working from a production standpoint. Bringing that into 72 and Sunny to work with the Vices and the BuzzFeeds. And then ultimately, as those entities started to make work that didn't work for the brands, we had to be there we needed a production vehicle to start making that work, start making that mid-form, long-form content, social media. The whole there's a whole industry there supporting the creative ad agencies, production companies, but they're all built to make ads. No one was built to make social media. No one was built to make documentaries, 3-minute documentaries. No one was there to, create newsrooms for brands that publish content, within hours of it being shot. There was no production vehicle for that. And as a global head of production at one of the fastest growing agencies, I was screwed. I had to make it. I had to build that entity so that I could stay relevant. And, and make our clients, feel like we could bring value to the table. And so ultimately, that is what was the driving force of creating the in-house, creating Hecho Studios, which became 72 and Sunny's in-house production arm.
Now, you were involved in the marketing team for Los Angeles Olympics 2028. Was that at Hecho?
Hecho supported that for sure.
Yeah. Tell me about that experience. That's a pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's got to be a cool project.
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate.
It's not an everyday project, right?
No, it wasn't. I've been really fortunate in my career to work on things, initiatives, campaigns that change the trajectory of something. Whether it's Steve Jobs coming back into Apple and introducing the Apple iMac to the world and ultimately the iPhone to the world, or, those are arguably, global changing events.
Those are cultural events.
Economic, bellwethers. Bringing the Olympics to Los Angeles, to a city that I absolutely just adore, felt important. It felt important because the Olympics is something I've always been fascinated with, but it's what unites the world.
Yeah.
You could, whatever war, whatever politics going on, for that moment in time, the Olympics brings the world together. And I saw that, and as somebody that's been like on the zeitgeist of what's happening in Los Angeles, I wanted our city to be able to celebrate that, to have that moment, and I wanted to be a part of it. So it felt important to me for our companies to be a part of that, and I wanted to play whatever role I could in bringing that to Los Angeles. So, and secondly, I felt those were important for the city from an economic standpoint. Like, this is the city I live in, the city that supports me, that's been good to me. And I needed to make sure that it can continue to do that. And bringing the Olympics here was, ultimately a really great economic product for our city to have, and will be, because I knew we could do it without a lot of investment. So that, being part of the team that pitched that, there was just an air of like, whatever it takes to make this happen, because we've been gifted this opportunity by the city of Los Angeles for a very, very important reason, that we shape and create culture. And that was what the city asked us to help them do.
And it worked.
It did work. I mean, we made some concessions. I mean, we originally pitched as LA24, but yeah, being part of that was incredible. And again, we were able to use Hecho, my company, for that to support. We built, interactive and VR-enabled walkthroughs of the Olympic villages, of the venues. We produced events for both the USOC and the IOC to come and participate in. We brought a lot of technology to the table, and it just ended up being a really incredible experience and to be part of, and something that, I did that in 2017, I believe.
Wow.
And knowing that it would be a 10-year run to when it happened was pretty exciting. I had these dreams of like, all right, I'm going to get to produce the opening ceremonies. No way in hell that was ever going to happen, but hell, I mean, I was close to it, so why not?
A boy can dream.
Yeah, a boy can dream. I'm like, that would be cool. I can do that. Yeah, probably not. Or I'd figure out who could, but that wasn't going to be what was given to me to do. But it was like, could be kind of cool.
We've really stepped through this career, and I'm really glad we've been able to go step by step like that. I mean, you're learning, you're building, you're traveling, you're creating things and building the credibility. This is all leading up to something.
Yeah.
And that something is Tom Dunlap. He needs to have his own shop.
Yep.
That's where we're going, right?
Yeah.
2 decades of forging this path. How did it come together?
Yeah.
SuperBloom. SuperBloom is that.
SuperBloom is that. Again, you go through these iterations in your career, and you learn, business. You see how people do things, and I always worked under somebody else's thing. Someone else's culture, business, entrepreneurship. I've been graced to be part with great people. But yeah, I think I can do that. I think I have an idea that I think this industry needs, and I think it can fly. And who can I get to work with me on that? Who can I convince to do that with me? But that was the next stage. Again, I had made all the things. I made all the commercials. I'd done television shows. I started an entertainment company. I started an in-house production company.
You'd been involved in all the parts.
Yeah, building. I'm a builder, right? And so the next obvious step was, and what I was really interested in was to learn how to start a company. Learn how to be an entrepreneur, get the financing, get the investors, learn what a board means, and an operational agreement, and a P&L, how to run a P&L. Those were things that I had pieces of that I felt like I had enough great mentorship that we could do it. If I had the right business partner and the right investors, we could do this. We could make something happen that the industry needs and use the legacy that both my business partner and I have in our various places we come from to actually build something with credibility. And so that was what was really intriguing to us. And actually the pandemic, which is when we started this thing, was the perfect time to do it.
Wow.
Because the industry had changed. The way people were consuming content had changed. The way people were making content had changed. You didn't need an office. You didn't need a lot of people. You just needed a great idea, understanding of the technology you need to do it, and the financial backing to make it happen. It was perfect. I didn't have to go and get a big office to start. I could do it from behind a computer and feel like it was scaled, to the nth degree without needing to do that. And everybody was in the same boat. They were all looking for innovation. They were all looking for something new. The clients we were working with were, had to think differently because the pandemic disrupted so many things. And so we were at the right time at the right place.
And with a new business like that, you come in with a lot of credibility, you've had all this experience, but you have to get client number one.
None of that means anything. Yeah, none of that means anything.
How do you get client number one?
Yeah, well, I think we were really smart in who we aligned with. First out of the gate, we knew that this was an issue. We knew we needed to make money.
Is that a concern?
Hell yeah! I had kids going to college, But so the people that are behind us, which is it's Mother Industries, which is another really great independent creative agency out in the world that rivals the Wieden+Kennedys and the Chiat. And we knew that they knew about us, and they invest in creative people to build creative businesses. And they had seen, because we had beat them out on projects, what our business model was capable of. And so the reason why we did the deal we did with them was because there was instant pipeline. We could remain independent. We didn't have to be part of Mother, but we could be SuperBloom. We could be our independent selves. And we knew that they had credibility and they were getting work that they could pass off to us. So we had an instantaneous pipeline because of how and who we aligned with. So that was a really crucial strategic part of how we set up the business. We gave away, a lot of our, we gave away, what our equity is in order to achieve that. Like, hindsight, do I go back? Could I have done that myself? Maybe,
but it takes a lot longer, right?
It takes a lot longer.
In another conversation, interview conversation I've had, I said the words, and I'm just going to say them again today. If you come to Hollywood and you want to make all the money, don't come to Hollywood.
You won't make the money.
It's split, and people get points, and 1 point and half a point, and somebody, put in half the budget, they're going to get a bunch of money. If you want all the money, don't come to Hollywood.
Right.
There's a lot of truth
to that.
A lot of pie, a lot of split in that pie.
Yeah. But you got to give a little to get a little too.
Of course. It's a collaboration on many fronts, and so then the money that comes down, there's a collaboration angle on that.
And plus, you want to work with good people. Like, my business partner and I didn't want to do this alone. We both had our skill sets and where we'd come from, but we also hadn't done this, so we wanted to work with like-minded individuals that supported our vision and could help us bring it to life. And they've been incredible partners and are still partners.
Would you like to talk about who some of your clients are? Or?
Yeah. So
Tell us some cool stuff.
Yeah, what was it? It's been interesting. The journey of SuperBloom as a creative company. We don't call ourselves a creative agency. We're classified as an ad agency, and we sometimes refer to ourselves as ad agency because we do ad agency things. But the journey, the creative journey of SuperBloom has been a really interesting one, because the types of clients that have joined our little merry band of people have been very, interesting in themselves, in a lot of different types of industries: beauty, tech, a lot of food and beverage, a lot of travel and hospitality. We've been able to grow, this business that is really unique to the industry, because we develop creative ideas, we develop strategy, but we also make everything. And we've had to build a creative community in which to do that, which we call the Creative Collective. And this really harkens back to my past of working with, at Ridley and working with Hollywood and bringing them into things. But that's been the thing that the clients have really liked, because we're giving our clients access to the same people that are driving the cultural conversation, whether it be on streamers, with showrunners and producers, or on social with the very creators that are making the work, bringing them into our creative process, putting them on the creative table, not just the influencer table, to be part of, to help create truly authentic, creative solutions that work for the platforms and the channels that we're distributing on. So the clients that we've been able to partner with have believed in that mission, have wanted that access. They want to work with people that are driving culture, that are impacting the world through storytelling or through marketing or through whatever their skill set is. So we've worked with everybody, big and small, from New Belgium Brewery in Fort Collins doing a crazy stunt in Napa where they wanted to pretend like they were building a beer-themed water park in downtown Napa and make that real.
I like their fat tire.
Yeah, this is for Voodoo Ranger. To big brands like Marriott Bonvoy on a global scale that are trying to attract, a new type of traveler, a younger traveler into their hotels and their properties, and needed a company that could think at that cultural level. The biggest clients we have right now are still Marriott Bonvoy, but the biggest one is Tyson Foods. So we do everything for Tyson. We do Tyson Chicken, Hillshire Farms, Jim and Dean, Adele's, Wright Brand Bacon, Ballpark. We are the kings and queens of chicken, beef, and pork, Gabe.
All right.
But it's incredible, because here is a massive Fortune 30 company that has trusted, that feeds 30% of the United States on any given basis.
Wow.
30% of the food that we eat, whether it's from the grocery store or the chicken nuggets at McDonald's or the toppings you get on your Domino's pizza, to the chicken that's in Chick-fil-A, to the fresh sausages you buy at the supermarket.
Yeah.
This is coming through tight. This felt important. And they gave us everything.
Wow.
I think they gave SuperBloom everything.
That's amazing.
So they've been an incredible client. But we've had opportunities to do some really fun stuff too with, we just did a really fun project for Silversea Cruise Line, which is a division of Royal Caribbean, where we basically shot in Antarctica, we shot in South America, Mediterranean. So we're this little company is making some waves.
Big footprint.
Yeah, but we're doing a lot of other things too, even beyond just the advertising clients we work with. The way we are embracing the creator community is really unique to us, and something that I really get a lot of joy of, because we're activating a lot of folks that would never otherwise not get opportunities to work in advertising, like when I brought Epic Score in.
Yeah.
That is a thing that we do every day. Like, I find young filmmakers and established filmmakers or showrunners that have never thought they'd have a career in advertising, and bring them in to make the work that we make and make them part of our team. And that's a really fun process.
Oh, and by the way, did we say we were at SuperBloom?
No.
We're at SuperBloom's agency shop.
Yep.
I love it.
In my house.
My final question for you. AI. It's a topic. Everybody's talking about it. And you've had an eye on all these different emerging technologies over the years. You have a pretty good take on them. AI, is it coming for us? Is it going to help us? What are your thoughts?
It's definitely coming for us if you're in the wrong industry. But for us, it's helping us. And we look at AI as a tool to help us do what we do for our clients faster, better, and with more cultural relevancy. Not just a money thing to save money or to cut something out of it, but honestly to help us to create and get to the audiences that we are trying to market to faster and with better resonance. And we've been really quick to bring it in. AI has been, because we started SuperBloom when we did, post-pandemic, building modern cloud-based tools to enable our production and post-production workflows, bringing in generative AI, even before we were calling it to help us scale and be more efficient in how we deliver content for our clients. It's been embedded in what we've been doing since day one. Now the tools are getting more advanced. We're learning how to use them, play with them, and how to make work that is better and stronger for our clients. In strategy and in business planning, we've actually built AI tools that help us look at what the world is saying and thinking and where our brands need to be. We've built a model around what all the studios and networks are buying from an entertainment perspective so that when we're providing solutions, we can go into our tools and be like, well, this is what's resonating on Netflix and Peacock, and so we should be creating content like that. For creativity, it's helping our creatives imagine worlds that they never were able to imagine on their own that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to go out to a visual effects or an artist to do. They can now experiment with those worlds. They can build their ideas faster and communicate their ideas faster, which ultimately sells our work faster and puts the right time and money into putting what we need to put on screen. From a workflow perspective, it's allowed us to just work so much more efficiently. Color correction, editing tools just increases our speed to market, which again, if you're moving at the speed of culture, all these tools help you stay relevant in the face of a changing and fragmented media environment. And so we're playing with them and we're teaching our people. We've given our team all the tools they ask for. They were early adopters of the early Gen AI, Soras and Veo 3s. Those things have been incorporated into the products we're putting out in the world a year and a half ago. We're now looking at how you do digital filmmaking with AI. I don't love it. I still think there needs to be a human element to it. It's kind of soulless, but it's going to be there and we're going to get there. And again, the creative community that we've built these individuals are out there using these tools every day and they're bringing their knowledge into us. So I'm excited by it.
It sounds like heavy implementation on your part,
Yeah.
which and it sounds like it's changing most, if not all, of the aspects of your
It
production
does.
and daily life. Yeah,
It allows a company like this to be this company without having to become this massive layered corporation with tons of people. And you start to lose control over what your values are and what your output is. So it allows us to stay engaged without having to pass off to armies of people to do our work. So for us, it's a value add and it's impacting every part of our business.
Wow.
And I think from an artist and creative standpoint, it's going to change the way that artists and composers and people work. But if you embrace the tools and learn how to use them, you'll be at the forefront of them and then you'll innovate with them. And that, I think, is the point.
Yeah, a phrase I keep coming across, I read as much as I can stand reading on all this topic. And, one of the things that the people in the AI world one of the points they're trying to make is AI is not going to replace you, but somebody using AI better than you is going to replace you.
Totally. That's a great statement. It's a true statement. And that's why, we quickly have been given the tools to our people.
The one thing that seems to be a constant thread in the conversations is the human beings need to keep making human being connections.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to make the humans make it through.
Yeah, well, if you look at our client base, travel and hospitality, those are human experiences,
Yes.
not robot experiences, right? So you still have to show humans having travel and hospitality experiences. Food. Humans are, I don't care where AI goes, humans are still going to have to eat.
And you seem to have a little bit to do with the food.
Yeah, and so you need to do the food, right? And I think, there are areas, like we have clients that are in the tech space that are innovating with AI, and they want to do everything in AI because that's their business model. Great, go do it. And we have other clients, again, the travel and hospitality places, like we see AI, but we still need to tell human connected stories. So those are humans to humans doing that work. So I'm very optimistic that this is just going to become a creative catalyst for us, and not something that steals our market share. But again, we're hopefully, and I doubt we are, moving as fast as we need to.
That's the one thing. Us humans, we adapt somewhat slowly, whereas something a computer can adapt in theory very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for this conversation
Of course,
today.
Gabe.
It's great to see you, of course.
Likewise.
But to walk through this journey that you've been on, and it's certainly not over, but I talked to my wife many, many years ago, and I said, Tom is I'm just waiting to hear when Tom opens his own shop. I'm just waiting for that day. There's no suspense in that for me of like whether it's going to happen or not. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was all leading up to it. And
Yeah.
it's so fun to know that somebody made that journey and got to that fruition point.
Well, I had a few people I was watching along the way, like yourself. So,
I'm a little guy.
kind of, but not really.
But yeah, I'm a little guy that made the distribution deals that allow Little Epic Score to have a very large footprint.
Yeah.
And that was a humble lesson that I learned along the way by watching others that had been doing it. I just watched and learned. And
Well, you had ambition and you had the balls to do it. And I think that's a lot. I mean, you did that at a very early stage, and I'd never met anybody who had started a business. Like, you were, I think, the first person I ever knew that started a business, and then a creative business, and made it successful, right?
Wow.
So I was like, well, I saw what you did, and and then saw what others could do.
if that guy can do it,
Well, everything's different. Yeah, it was kind of like that, but it was also like, you got to do these things at a certain point, and you can do it and be successful.
Long ago, it was clear you had the temperament, you had the desire, you were, pushing forward.
Yeah.
So
I've also had good partners. This has not been a journey that I've done myself. I'm a pretty naive and dumb guy. I fortunately have some really strong people around me, right? So we all complement each other, and I think that's important.
that's again that human connection thing. So.
Indeed.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Gabe.
All right.
Yeah, good luck with your podcast. Like and subscribe.